Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Energy on the Field, Sports as Early Adopters of Technology. I appreciate your coming. Dr. Martin had talked about pioneers, and we have 4 pioneers in the field for deploying renewable technologies in the sports arenas. My name is Mike Richter. I'm the founding partner of Healthy Planet Partners. We finance the deployment of renewable energy in sports stadiums in particular. You have a collection of fantastic examples of where the sports industry is headed. We'll start out on the far end. Leonard Bonacci, Vice President, Event Services and Operations from the Philadelphia Eagles. Leonard served as the Vice President of the Event Operations and Event Services for the Eagles since 2003. In this role, he is responsible for overseeing and directing the game day and special events at Lincoln Field and NovaCare Complex and associated park and venues. Next to him, you have Jennifer, oh, sorry, that is not Jennifer, I'm sorry, with the beard. That is Jason Twill. Jason manages sustainability initiatives worldwide for Vulcan Incorporated. That's a Paul Allen company that owns the Seattle Seahawks, Sounders FC football team, and the Portland Trail Blazers. He is also the co-founder of the Green Sports Alliance, and they are a not-for-profit dedicating to fostering sustainability initiatives in the area of sport. It's 3 years old, and he is lovingly called the grandfather of this movement, although he doesn't look it, he's 80 years old. Jennifer Regan is the Global Sustainability Director of AEG, one of the leading sports and entertainment presenters in the world. She has a wealth of knowledge because they manage and own many, many different stadiums, so her view is, we're excited to hear her. To my left, Dr. Mike Lynch. Mike is the Managing Director in Green Sport Innovation for NASCAR, which is based in Daytona, Florida. Prior to leading NASCAR, Dr. Lynch was Tenured Professor at Purdue University. He's got a great deal of knowledge and can speak to all sorts of sustainability initiatives that are going on in what can be disparate ownership in the NASCAR circuit. So I welcome you today and thank you for our board here. It's fantastic. I'll start out, and maybe we'll all do this. Just give us a little description on who you are, a little deeper, how your organization or you got involved in this, and what you've been doing at your stadiums. I mean, this is a technology summit, and I think the audience wants to know what you've deployed and why you made those decisions to deploy that specific technology. I'll start at the end. Leonard, please.
Well, we were voluntold. The ownership, the Philadelphia Eagles, Christina and Jeffrey, really feel an obligation with a brand as public as the Philadelphia Eagles. They feel like it's incumbent upon us to use that brand to move causes forward. One that's important to them is obviously the planet and the shape of our planet, and they feel as though if we start asking for green supplies for our operation, or can operate our business in a less destructive manner, leadership by example is probably the best. So to use that logo to move a cause forward is basically the essence of how we started, and then their buy-in, commitment, financial commitment was enough for us to get it started.
Okay, before we move on, just give a little bit of a description of what you've done so far. How have you applied this motivation?
Okay, so to leave the technology space a little bit, we started with a recycling movement. It was literally a little blue bucket put under our desks, and we were told to throw our paper in there. From that, it moved into recycling, moved into some composting efforts, energy reduction plans, and the crowning achievement right now for us is we just flipped the switch on a 3 megawatt solar and wind, essentially a power plant that's part of our new stadium.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll get back to that because that was impressive. We were down about 2 weeks ago looking at it. Before we move on, I just want to encourage everybody, if you have a question, specific question, to be very helpful, tweet it or use the method up there. We'll move on. Jason, go ahead, please.
So I'm Jason Twill with Vulcan Inc. in Seattle, Washington, and I think my background's in real estate development, and we've been building a sustainable community in Seattle under the auspices of Paul Allen's real estate company, Vulcan Real Estate, for a long time. And in 2008, when the market tanked, I got repositioned to focus on sustainability, and knowing that our owner was the owner of the Seattle Seahawks, the Portland Trail Blazers, and the Seattle Sounders, I thought about how we can make a business case to green our stadiums and arenas and really have a big impact on the fan base in our community in Seattle and Portland. And made a business case to install the largest solar array in Washington State at CenturyLink Field. It's an 800 kilowatt array. Major investment in lighting upgrades and water technologies to reduce our energy and water footprint further. And through that effort, the Portland Trail Blazers got their arena LEED Gold certified. It's the first arena in the world to do so, an existing arena. And that all led to this deep collaboration with the other teams in our area, which led to the ultimate genesis of the Green Sports Alliance, an organization that's focused on collaborating among 160 professional sports teams now on how do we advance sustainability and ingrain it in the culture of our country and make it a new social norm.
Yeah, you should go to the Green Sports Alliance website. This is something it's a wealth of knowledge there, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. I said it was only 3 years old, and it's done incredible work.
3 years old. But it was really, I mean, it was much about making a business case. The investments we've made in Seattle are saving us about $500,000 a year at our venues, each of them, which is, it lets them spend money on other things they want to, part of their core business. And it's a big deal financially for them. We're long-term leaseholders of the venues. The Rose Garden in Portland we own outright. On CenturyLink Field we have a 25-year lease. It's a public stadium authority, so the investments we're making, we're also being stewards of a public asset. So that's kind of the business case we made, and it got approved. So,
excellent. Jennifer?
That's great. So I always like to define AEG because no matter how well you know us, you always think, is that AIG? Did you guys go bankrupt 2 years ago? AEG stands for Anschutz Entertainment Group, and Mr. Anschutz, starting in the mid-1990s, is really recognized for founding Major League Soccer. He at one point owned 9 of 11 soccer teams. And from that, he purchased the LA Kings hockey team, and then had a visionary CEO who recognized the role of the physical development of the facilities and how to manage facilities. So we own Staples Center in Los Angeles, the O2 in London. We have management contracts with venues like the Rose Garden in Portland, and so we get to work with Vulcan there. And also management contracts with new and fun, exciting venues like the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. So we work predominantly with the NBA and NHL, a little bit with Major League Baseball, mainly with Major League Soccer. And if you've heard about us lately, it's because we're trying to do a lot more with the NFL in Los Angeles. So we're a very big footprint. In addition to our facility management, we also do live music. So we own Coachella Music Festival and promote an amazing array. We're the second largest promoter in the world, second only to Live Nation. So when we were asking ourselves the question of why are we addressing the environment or why are we, engaging in these technologies, first and foremost, we have, we recognize, all of our leaders at this table recognize the inherent responsibility we have to be responsible businesses. But energy is the second greatest spend other than labor at our company. And we are affiliated with 110 facilities worldwide, and 58 of them, of which we have management or ownership contracts with. So first and foremost, if we reduce the impact of our operations, or if we design our buildings more efficiently, we're going to benefit as a business. We're going to have a stronger bottom line. So the main 3 ways that we focus on the environment is 1, through the design and operation of our facilities, 2, through the partnerships with our suppliers and through our supply chain, as well as through sponsors, which is something we all have a unique interaction with that might be different than other industries you work with. And 3, which is really exciting, is leveraging the relationship with athletes and musicians and the brands that are our sponsors to raise environmental awareness. So those are the 3 things that we focus on as a company, and our entire environmental program is built around. And once again, energy is the second greatest spend of our multi-billion-dollar company. So for us, we've invested in solar panels at 5 of our venues. We had the largest sports solar array at Staples Center when we built it in 2008. And one of the benefits of being an early adopter is being surpassed by those. So now we have the 3rd largest, but when we first built it, it was the largest. So I'm thankful for everyone who's passed us in that way, and I look forward to sharing more technologies.
Yeah, that's a theme across most sports. They're very happy when other people win. That's a joke. Okay, Dr. Mike.
We started up NASCAR Green right around when Jason got sort of retasked into the green space as well. So it was late '08. It was a very difficult time economically in the country, But what our chairman, Brian France, and the rest of NASCAR leadership had noted was that, and in retrospect to the folks in this room, I'm sure, and the folks here on this panel, in retrospect, the timing was really quite good, because late 08, early 09, there were arguably maybe 10 to 15 of the Fortune 500 had major sustainability programs, and however, companies were waking up to the competitive advantages of having green be part of thinking, both from an operational standpoint and from a marketing differentiation standpoint. And dovetailing with that, all you had to do was maybe watch children's television programming for an hour or two back in early 09, and the green messages were very much there, which also was a hint that the U.S. public, the general public, was leaning in a green direction as well. And then there were also some policy pushes behind it, having to do with a coincidence there in terms of change of presidential administration and that sort of thing. And really, what NASCAR aimed to do was to reflect that and to really take a distinctive position in terms of doing all the right things in terms of best-in-class initiatives under the three main categories of our environmental impact. So with large events and with large broadcast, there's waste, there's emissions, and there's power generation. Then, within a couple of those categories as well, we've got a bit of an unusual position because we're racing cars and everything that goes into that. And not only racing cars, but racing cars that, like the Generation 6 version now, the new version of our car in our Sprint Cup series, a car that's very relevant to everyone in the country in terms of it looks a lot like what you can go buy in a showroom and drive home. So the feeling was that by applying technologies that were ready for broad adoption, whether it's in the recycling space or in the renewable energy space or energy management or biofuels and the like, we could essentially provide a good demonstration or example of, well, good enough for NASCAR and then good enough for you. And whether that you is a large company, a middle market company in the B2B space, or a consumer, we felt like we could lay that out, and we'll share some data along the way here in the discussion. Our recent fan data suggests that the green platform, in addition to being a responsibility in sport, when you do it in such a way like the folks here, it can be a huge opportunity to create aspiration to go farther. And that's just a little bit of a hint of what we're finding in our fan base, and we're really pleased about.
I think that's really exciting. And we've spoken before, and sports is all about performance. Of course, the military is, and all commerce is, but the fact that you have biofuels going in your vehicles right now, and they perform every bit, if not better, and you've had plenty of conversations about that, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But all of these arenas have to perform well, and they're huge energy hogs, if you will. And there's a lot of groundswell culturally to have this happen. So it seems like a perfect opportunity. Sports is right in the mix there so well. Maybe if the panel could just describe some of the hurdles that you had doing it. I mean, it all seems like a great idea, but there's inertia, there's the term of these things, there's ownership issues. Who owns this? Who's going to get the benefits? What are some of the big hurdles that you had putting these great programs that you do have into place? Because there's certainly some big ones for the early adopters. Let's start with Mike.
Well, I'll say the first hurdle for us was just getting some of the old guard to have that paradigm shift, to say this makes sense. The biggest thing for me, the biggest aha moment, I happened to be one of those obstacles at the time, and our current president of our team was an obstacle. He was the CFO at the time. Because the conversation at that point we thought was green or profitable. And we quickly found out that it is not an or conversation, it's an and conversation. And through recycling, through this energy program that we're doing, we're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars from recycling, by recycling. We're saving millions of dollars by doing our energy project. So it really truly is an and conversation. And I think you need, in our experience, find out each area's why, or what's important to them, how they are going to receive it, what they need to hear, and then craft the message to address those very important things to them. For example, real quick, our PR department produced a media guide for years. I'm sure you've been in one or two, Mike. And, in football, there's 100 plus guys will come out to try out for the team. So the media guide is produced. By the time training camp is over, 50% of that guide is wrong because half of the team will be let go. 53 men are on the roster when we start the season. So we started to say, geez, we're printing all these. We have to provide them to the league. Why aren't we putting them on flash drives? And somebody said, you know what, I don't know. So just by doing that saves a ton of money. It's environmentally responsible. There's just too many reasons why not to do it. And nowadays, it's on an FTP site. Guys go there. They can update the roster. And free agency time, like coming up here, rosters will change constantly. You can keep the media up to date quicker than any book could ever do. So just identifying with each department these kind of key questions. What are we using? Why are we using it? Do we still need to use it? What can we replace it with? Having those questions with ownership at the table is a very effective discussion. Take ownership away from the table, it's kind of a show, dog and pony show. But the minute you put the quote-unquote juice at the table, then the conversation gets real.
That's a good point. There's a lot of silos, right? And you guys have incredible ownership in Philadelphia Eagles that said we want to do this, so people tend to listen up. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that, Jason, too. Sure. Great ownership there.
A lot of the challenges we faced in kind of investing in energy efficiency and renewables at our stadiums was really sourcing financing. When we started looking at this in 2008, 2009, heavily tracking property assessed clean energy bonds, the PACE program, qualified energy conservation bonds, Obama's stimulus package, and met with finance people. I met with the DOE loan guarantee program team. Our mayor's office had recovery zone facility bonds, all these different types of financial instruments, and none of them worked. Because it was a public stadium was an issue, the way the lease was structured, it just never penciled out. They were either too short of a term or too high of a rate. And in the end, I made the business case by combining an investment in energy efficiency and lighting and water reduction, which reduced the operating cost significantly, and combining that with an investment in solar, so kind of bundling it all together, took a solar project which on its own was a payback of 20-something years because we have some of the lowest utility rates in the Western Hemisphere in Seattle with our hydropower, and combined it with the energy efficiency side and made it a 10-year payback all in. And with our 25-year lease, it made a business case. That's a sound investment. So after 10 years, we're reaping the benefits of about $800,000 a year with escalation. That was a challenge. It took about a year and a half to kind of put the puzzle together, get all the stakeholders engaged, the city, the utilities, the federal incentive programs put together. We luckily have a lot of internal finance and tax people to help us do that, but I had to educate all of them on these programs because it's not a conventional investment for us. The other piece is very similar to Leonard, is really how do you take all these things we've done and make them bankable? How do you create a platform? And the evolution of what we've created at CenturyLink Field, we now have a brand called Defend Your Turf, which is an umbrella kind of branding platform on everything we've done for the environment with materials, renewable energy, electric car, transportation. We have charging stations, materials, supply chain, and food under one umbrella, which helps sponsors have a platform to come in and kind of share their own ideas and how they've helped defend our turf in Seattle and the environment. And that's been kind of the challenge of getting all the stakeholders in the sports industry, because this is a little bit outside their field, to get engaged, understand how to get a lot of these elements sponsored, bring new partners, unconventional partners to sports to the table. And it's just beginning to see that happen. So there's a whole new kind of sponsorship world accruing in the sports industry, which is great to see.
So there's inertia, there's the financing.
There's inertia. Yeah.
Both of those things are obviously there. Jennifer, what can you shed a little light on that just to get this thing going? What were your hurdles?
Yeah, we have a different role. I mean, in some places, of our 58 venues that we manage and own, we built 7 of them, we own 12, and the rest are management contracts. So in some cases, when we're looking at technology that's advanced, like solar panels or on-site, any kind of on-site power generation, we're only going to be looking at the ones that we own or the ones that we own or manage. And when you start to get beyond that, it's hard for us to make it. We're the middle people. Yep. But we recognize the imperative in the information that we have. So sometimes we are playing that role of introducing the technology and trying to do the business case. But unfortunately, without an owner who's willing to invest in it, or an owner who's willing to see the long-term benefit, the system does fail. So thankfully for us, we're an owner who sees the benefit. So at the places that we can, like at Staples Center, our biggest hurdles were just the unique challenges of our buildings. So we were lucky to be in California, which had great funding for solar. We were coming in right at the end of a great program in 2008. So our system was originally going to be 3.8 million, but with our funding and the rebates, it was able to get it down to 1.2, which was much more palatable for us. And our efficiency of the building, we basically got our payback in 6.7 years, which was something that's a little bit longer than normally Mr. Anschutz likes to do, but he was able to approve it. The challenge for us was people assume, and you look at our big venues, that we have these huge footprints for you to lay and cover solar panels across the top. Our biggest issue was the roof membrane. We couldn't keep the insurance on the roof membrane after penetrating it, and it's load bearing, because one of the things that make us most profitable is being able to hold as much lighting rigging for events like the Grammys. And so people look at our venues, and these great genius technology people come to us with all these ideas for what they perceive as this really big footprint, or these really sturdy buildings that have a lot of dead space. In truth, we are very lean buildings that need to be flexible to whatever a client wants. So we're looking for the nexus of technology that's both really efficient but really compact and light. So a lot of the new technologies that come to us are still bulky and big. It's like the evolution of the fuel cell. We don't have as much space as you think we do, and we don't have as much flexibility we have many requirements on the physical built environment for us. So finding partners who are willing to start to innovate on those aspects were really huge for our solar. And it's been really huge. We're looking at a lot of cogeneration and fuel cell technology, and really trying to see how can we get that footprint much smaller.
Excellent. Mike?
Well, I'm actually in listening to folks kind of talk through the dilemmas that you all faced. We worked through some very similar things. Maybe just take a little bit of a different tack on it. Where NASCAR as a league, it's the average number of favorite drivers of a fan for us is about 6. So our fans of NASCAR, which are 60 plus million people, they think of the sport as the sport overall, as the platform in which they've got favorites, but multiple. So what that does is that opens up the opportunity to have essentially a chorus of people, whether it's the primary athlete sort of personalities, the drivers, the owners, the prominent executives, the track presidents, prominent executives in our partners, whether those are the manufacturer partners or the sort of corporate business partners, et cetera, and broadcast partners as well. There's a chorus that can speak to all of this. But before actually doing anything and getting anything done, so to speak, and certainly there was no lack of appetite to either invest capital or time and attention and effort in anything that would benefit the sport from an environmental impact standpoint. We almost had too many trees to even begin to see the forest, so to speak. So there could have been literally thousands of avenues that folks could have run down, and it would have been difficult to see which ones would have necessarily worked or not. So one of the challenges that we faced was literally sort of pulling back as a collective and just saying, let's wait and strategize here so that we can identify what the pathways are, what the yellow brick roads may be, that we could go down and actually see some benefit here. And then we came to realize some very similar things to what folks have mentioned here, which is absolutely key in the technology space. I don't have to tell folks in this audience that a great idea and a technology that could really be impactful, you still have to have, there's a gearing of timing, need, and maturity of the concept that has to come together before really a significant deployment of it may happen. And so what we came to realize is that whether it was in renewable energy or in sort of what might be in prospectively thought of as niche sort of solution areas, like electronics recycling, for example. 3 years ago, we would have looked at electronics recycling as something that was really far down the list. Now, Creative Recycling Systems, one of the leading recyclers of electronics in the U.S., is an official partner of NASCAR Green, and we're very proud of that because of what they do in terms of avoiding the need to import and mine rare earth elements, and also just being environmentally responsible with difficult to dispose of items like any electronic equipment, which also has to do with defense. But that industry space wasn't ready to be a partner until last year. Similarly to Green Earth Technologies, another company that came on board as one of our partners recently in their G Clean line of products. They have this really sort of profound, flexible surfactant chemistry space that they've defined for themselves. It's incredibly benign to the environment, but 2 years ago they wouldn't have been ready to be a partner either. And then as far as renewable energy deployments, we've had those happen in different ways at different venues, also having to do with sort of local constraints or incentives, and just timing of the technology being ready. And it wasn't lost on us that part of what we ran into with renewables was, with solar and wind in particular, is that, of course, utilities have been building big wind and solar farms for a long time. So there was a lot of maturity there in the space, but there were other industry dynamics there where bringing these down, like literally we think of our venues as large, but actually relative to a utility installation, they're quite small and actually subscale. So that's something that we've had to wrestle with in the sport for us. But so really, the challenge has been to actually define clearly in real time what the right fit of sort of technology maturity and what types of technologies, whether it's corn ethanol in our race cars and that space looking for greater deployment, or it's in technology areas that, whether it's in recycling with Coca-Cola Recycling or these other companies that we just mentioned, or safety clean and automotive fluids. Is the technology ready to sort of ride the push that it gets from attention from 60 million people plus the B2B network that's part of our sport? So finding that and having a set of criteria around it has required a level of discipline that's been more difficult than we thought, but really it required a ton of analysis and work.
It's interesting because when you think about the sports field, you think of it as just one industry, but look how disparate these, a NASCAR track is very different than a basketball court or a football stadium, right? So I'm interested, to the extent that we haven't discussed it, what are the technologies that you guys have seen work best, right? And it looks like we kind of covered it. But how did you go about making that decision? Was it just purely economics? Look, this solar will do it, and I have a field to deploy it on, or this is going to get the most wow for the buck, right? People will see it when they drive by my stadium. Like, you're doing an awful lot of things that are behind the scenes. Do people know that you're recycling the oil, and do they know that these cars are running on? They wouldn't if you didn't put it out there, right? So I would just like you to speak first of all on what technologies and how you went about making that decision, because from what I gather, a lot of the technology that you're deploying aren't necessarily cutting edge. They're solar panels that have been around 4 decades. There's recycling. There's a lot of things that we have on the shelf that we haven't put into play, which is legitimate. I mean, you guys are changing the way people think about that, but I'm curious. My next question will follow up on that, but how did you go about making a decision on what you did, and what is that specific technology? Is it a one-size-fit-all? Jen, you have a lot of facilities under your control, and do you say, well, really, we're going to go down lights first, then solar, right down this little list? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We'll start with you, Leonard, again.
Sure. Leo? Okay, sorry, go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
I guess it would really depend. For us, there was an economic discussion, and then there was this corporate responsibility discussion, and both of which played into our decision calculus. So from an economic standpoint, we looked at some of the low-hanging fruit. We took our energy usage and essentially cut it in half. By things as technologically advanced as the Lutron lighting system and our HVAC systems, and just making them smarter, using our building management system to make sure filters and service on equipment is up to date to make them run as efficiently as possible. And as low-tech as attaching a clipboard to an intern and saying, walk around and make sure the TVs are off after the game. If any of you have children, you probably have 2 or 3 TVs in your house, try keeping those things turned off. Now put a couple thousand and then 70,000 kids in your house and see how hard it is to keep the TVs turned off. So it's high-tech and low-tech. another thing we did, like for example in the wind and solar project, there were some decisions that had to be made. For example, Mike, you and I talked about this, is the wind component of our project could essentially power a couple of hairdryers. But the windmills or turbines on top of the stadium are pretty dramatic and send a very clear message to those passing by. So we really felt, even though there was probably more sizzle than steak as it related to the wind component, over 11,000 solar panels are affixed to our stadium, but they're just not as impactful. They are impactful, but not as impactful, because when the media comes out to talk about it, the first thing they're filming are those wind turbines. The other first thing they're filming is this corn cup that we have, right? It's not nearly the best part of our recycling program, but that's the thing they catch. So that sizzle side goes to the corporate responsibility side of things. If we can get our message out that, hey, an industry that's known for its success, big guys, fast cars, big jewelry, big everything, right, can be as minimalistic as possible as it relates to their impact on the environment. It is kind of a strange message, almost incongruent, but you have to try to force those two together and really put it under the umbrella of performance. NASCAR is a great example of being green and actually upping their performance. There is a finite pool of money to bring players and equipment into your facility. If you can reduce your energy consumption and cost of energy and cost of operation and funnel those dollars to performance on the field, that's a competitive advantage at the end of the day. So there's a couple of different things. I apologize, it wasn't exactly a straight answer. It jumps around a little bit, but there are these two silos essentially at the end of the day that we look at: the economic impact and then the corporate responsibility impact.
Go ahead, Juice. Yeah.
So the mantra we created, the roadmap for our venues, is really efficient, smart, clean. So energy efficiency investment first, smart operations, and then introduce the clean, renewable energy. By doing that, I mean, I think the foot in the door project for a lot of the people in the sports industry was the waste stream, recycling and composting. We're very lucky in Seattle that we have infrastructure to support that. And in the 6 years since I've been working with them, the Seahawks and Sounders, they went from 3% landfill diversion rate to just in 2012, 94%. So they're beating most of our office properties, which is pretty amazing for a sports venue that hosts 72,000 people, that 94% of all the waste stream that goes through that venue is diverted from a landfill. The next easy step in was lighting. Retrofitting lighting in Seattle, partnering with big technology firms that specialize in LEDs and T5HO lighting is a rapid payback. Making that investment water, and by doing those energy efficiency investments, we reduce the operating footprint. So by the time we put the solar in, if we didn't do that energy efficiency, it would have powered maybe 20% of the venue. Now it's powering 50%. So there's periods of time, and this is the event center that's south of the stadium, so there's two separate buildings at CenturyLink Field in Seattle, and the array sits on top of a 4-acre roof. But by doing that investment in energy efficiency, we get a lot more bang for our buck in the investment in the solar PV array. That's been just a very easy case study to make for the stakeholders at our organizations.
Okay, Jen.
So yeah, we've got what's fun about AEG's portfolio of buildings is kind of like we're a little, we're a thin slice of the entire industry. So we have actual clubs that are music clubs that are 300 to 700 people, to music clubs that are 7,000, to arenas and stadiums. So an arena is about 18 to 20,000 people, and a stadium is 20,000 to 68, 70,000. And there's some stadiums that are larger than that, but that's about the average. And so, we're constantly battling having a portfolio viewpoint and trying to do things on scale, but then making that unique decision based on the specific facility or the facility type. So for example, we're really, these are products that we're using, and so we found this refrigerator economizer called E-Cube. It's a simple, scalable thing. We've done math on it both at a small club and an arena. When we find something like that that's easy, it's got a payback of 6 months to 18 months, and then we try to do that at scale. We try to introduce it into every venue, even ones we don't own, because the math and the facts, the ROI should be so strong that it's easy to make that decision. But when you're talking about these longer term paybacks, you hear Leo talk about you're managing a budget that not only brings in teams or players. If you're a venue, you're managing investment in the front of house experience. We're in the business of giving you an amazing guest experience. That's our primary business. Then we sell sponsorships and we sell tickets. They're all kind of warped in there together. So we are going to be more likely to invest in that front of house experience or that premium experience for a sponsor or a guest or for our athletes than we would sometimes for that back of house experience like the parking lot lights. As long as it's meeting safety regulations, we're not going to be as concerned about improving the efficiency there. So it's really hard for us to pick one thing and take it everywhere unless it's less than an 18-month payback, which, as we all know, is very aggressive for some of the technologies we're talking about. So if it's less than 18 months, then it's scalable, most likely. It's kind of a good cutoff, and that's where we find things like eCube. Now, if we're looking at longer than 18-month payback, that's where we have to be a little bit more strategic, and thankfully we have a portfolio of buildings we own where we can do pilots. So, for example, one of the smaller things that we think we can scale is an bipolar ionization for our HVAC system. It saves about 30% on energy on ventilation because we can reduce the amount of outdoor air we bring inside. It's great, but the payback's 24 to 36 months. So that's one that we're looking at now. Is that scalable? Can we take it around? But solar panels, or we've been looking at fuel cells and that technology. There we really have to pilot it. And that's so when I think about where the new area that we're most fascinated by, it's lighting. I say energy is the second greatest expense. Well, within energy, it's HVAC and lighting. And for us, there's a lot of really simple operational things we can do to control our HVAC. I mean, the operations teams that we're sitting with, and Leo knows this, if you have the staff time, you can control when things are going on and off in your building with the right walkie-talkie and the right lighting control system and the HVAC system. But what you can't control is the energy intensity of those things. And that's where lighting becomes the biggest spend for our buildings within the energy category. And there really isn't great cost-effective LED or efficient lighting in the performance lighting. So we can do LED lighting in parking lots, we can do LED lighting in back of house, but if you want the efficient lighting on the arena floor and not messing with the lumens that you need to comply with the NHL and the NBA's lighting regulations for filming their that game, that's what we're here for, sports. Anyway, so lighting. I would say lighting's the biggest area that we're trying to see if there's any solutions. High performance lighting. We're doing some testing of some lighting that's being used in the industry. It's all pilots right now, but I'd love to see that become scalable.
Michael, go ahead. And after this, I'm going to throw out we have some great questions from the audience, and then it's just whoever wants to, we don't have to go right down the line here, but I want to let you, Michael, finish, and then we're going to start going, whoever wants to jump on the questions that I have. So I get through as many as I possibly can, because there's some good questions here. Go ahead, Mike.
In the interest of time, I'll make this very brief. So the criteria that we've used in order to make decisions about what to deploy, and Sunoco Green E15 race fuel is a good example. So that's 15% American-grown, American-made corn ethanol blended with unleaded racing gas, and that's something that's been incredibly impactful and has really caught the attention of our fans because it went straight to some of the key themes. One was around criteria. We've been really looking for the convergence of environmental impact reduction and symbolic impact from the standpoint of the fan base, because if you can have very credible, smart, measurable impact on the environment in a positive way in anything that we do, like introduction of a biofuel or other technologies, and have it be something that's incredibly symbolic and even visceral for the fan, and speak specifically to 3 message points. And we asked NASCAR Nation, and continue to do it on a regular basis, to ask NASCAR Nation how they think about green as opposed to more general definitions. NASCAR Nation is about conservation of the land and the environment for us, our kids, and our grandkids, are about creation of jobs. So green is great if it creates jobs in the U.S., and green is also great if it helps strengthen us in terms of national energy security. Keeps the dollar here at home and keeps the troops here at home. So that framework is really what has driven literally every decision we've made in terms of deployment of an initiative from a green standpoint. Does it have credible, measurable, and significant impact? Is it highly symbolic, and does it fit that message platform? And so American ethanol generating more horsepower in the car and being something that's classified as a renewable fuel by the EPA and going straight to conservation. 500,000 jobs created already, and then if you go to 15%, you create 1 million more. And national energy security is a no-brainer aspect of that as well. That's a really good example of really striking a very strong chord with the fan base while also having a measurable impact on how we affect the environment and the sport, while also generating more horsepower. So that's just one that has all the ingredients, and that thought process has been applied to literally everything that we've done, large and small.
That's fantastic. T. Boone Pickens spoke about that yesterday. I think it's perfect, very powerful. How, for whoever can take this, how can ARPA help, right? So there are these emerging technologies. Okay, Jace, you're chomping at the bit over there, but there will be emerging technologies. There's needs that you don't have, and I think particularly off the top of my head, we also have the 34-minute blackout, right, of the Super Bowl. And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, they should have had renewable energy. And I thought, oh crap, if they have renewable energy, this is going to give it a black eye. Where can these emerging technologies go, and how can ARPA help get them in there?
Let me take a shot at that real quick. Hey, I do want to make a comment about the relevancy of this panel at this conference. So this is a different kind of conference that I've ever attended in my life. I met a lot of different people outside of my field of expertise. And maybe people scratched their head when they saw this on the invitation, the agenda. But to steal a quote from one of our friends, Alan Hershkowitz at NRDC, 18% of Americans pay attention to science, 86% pay attention to sports. Another quote he always uses is that all industries meet on the sports field. The chemical industry, the food and beverage industry, the energy industry, the water industry. So what I see as a relationship with ARPA is how can the sports industry be a conduit for these amazing technologies that are being developed by brilliant people like you, and getting them into the face of the public, where we have hundreds of millions of sports fans visiting very public venues and stadiums across the country. Very few people get to visit the Department of Defense assets. I know I haven't been able to yet. I'd love to see some of the technologies deployed on those assets. But, stadiums are one of the last bastions for community gathering spaces. When we have a Seahawks game in Seattle, we have 15% of the population of our city in one room, so to speak, for a few hours. And if by making these technologies highly visible to them, it creates a new social norm about the energy future for this country. It makes a compelling argument for the investment in these technologies. It also can create the motivation for these sports fans to do these things at their homes. So the platform we've created in Seattle, we want to reflect what our community values. We're in a very ecologically conscious region of the United States. What we're doing is not about being better than anybody else in the industry. We want to do what's right for the fans that support our teams and for our city, and demonstrate in a way that they can do these same technologies like solar panels or weatherization programs or more efficient windows, simple stuff like that, heat pumps in their homes, and try to kind of create what we've done at the venue and make it a viral cause in our community. So I think partnering with ARPA and deploying these advanced energy technologies at highly visible public venues like sports stadiums is a big deal. And when athletes talk about this stuff, people pay attention. So,
to continue Jason's thinking, it's exactly how the NRG Philadelphia Eagles arrangement came about. NRG came to us and basically said we have some technologies that we think could really make a difference, and in a very public fashion. So to affix 11,000 solar panels to the side of a facility that houses 70,000 fans every Sunday, and then the top 10 shows of all time, I think 9 of them are Super Bowls. So I mean, the football is watched by a lot of different people, and to have the blimp or the overhead shot show the solar panels in the parking lot and the wind turbines on top of the stadium, it starts to generate some buzz, right? What's going on there? How's that happening? And it's not just, everybody's got their own thing, right? So some people want to be friendlier to the earth, and some people just want to see a payback. Why are you doing that from a business perspective, right? Well, it's because we're saving $32 million. How's that? You in? And then they're in. Somebody else might say, all those fossil fuels, and it's just so gluttonous, you guys getting together like that. And well, what if we told you that, we're zero impact? From an energy perspective, we're off the grid. From a recycling perspective, we're 99.8% diversion rate. So what's the, other than the only thing we haven't figured out yet is everybody coming to the event. How do I lessen that impact? And that takes a lot of smart people in a room, as has been mentioned up here, and we're going to need help from every industry, whether it be governments, private industry, our sports teams together talking on how we get a kind of a more efficient system going. But I think NRG is a nice case for that.
Let me just jump in here. We have a question. How do you make sure it's not greenwashing? One thing that we haven't talked about is your measurement. We spoke about this, Jason. You guys have to measure this stuff to know there's a need, number one. Number two, to know that it's actually working. So just a quick answer on that one.
It's vetting. For us, we had an electronics recycling program come to us and say, we'd really like to recycle your electronics. Well, when we did our homework, we found out they were literally shipping the things overseas and just dumping them in some country that wouldn't report they were taking it. You just have to do your homework. We have a energy from waste component to our diversion program. And we went out there, visited it, talked to the EPA about it, wanted to make sure that this made sense and was consistent with our mission. And it's really, Mike, in a nutshell, is doing your homework and just vetting it, using a lot of smart people that know this space and just vetting it.
I want to jump in there and say, ironically, the first thing we invested in AEG was not technology, but was in our measuring platform. And in 2009, and I have this here, only 2 copies, so I'm going to tell you to go online, we started measuring the resources consumed and waste generated at every venue, and we put significant dollars into getting that information because that was how we knew where we should be focusing, and that is guiding our program to this day. I'm thankful to say that we're a part of the movement across the whole sports teams, and the Green Sports Alliance and the NRDC are leading this for teams to measure. So the Major League Baseball, NHL, NFL, NBA all have initiatives now to encourage their teams and facilities to measure on a similar platform. But what matters is what you measure, what measures what you matters. That old adage is so true for us. And the last piece I have to jump in and say on technology, I think Jason totally nailed it in terms of the value proposition that we have here for you at ARPA-E, and we're asking for you back. But look at it in 2 categories. You've got existing venues that are perfect for featuring any application that can be done on a commercial level, on a residential level. So think of, if it's an existing venue, think about things you want to highlight for residential, because we have an amazing residential audience. But there's a whole realm of new venues that are being developed, and that's where you have to think about it on a city scale. If we're developing a new football stadium, could we be looking at on-site energy generation that doesn't just power our building but could connect into the neighboring buildings? A lot of these venues are in urban, dense cores, and we have this new footprint that we're dealing with. We know we're going to be generating a lot of waste. Can we do on-site biocomposting that to waste, waste generation, incineration? I mean, there's all kinds of technologies that we see on large scale, but are there smaller scales of it we can do on-site physically? So I'm most interested in fuel cells powered by biogas generated from the waste in the downtown area where our venues are. So show me that technology and make it convenient for me, please. We will invest in it. And all kinds of things, and that lighting.
There's a question here that says the natural gas boom, how does that impact the energy initiatives you're working on? And basically, I think the broader question is, you've made a decision to go solar, or you've made a decision to have an energy efficient boiler put in. Is there a fear of being leapfrogged? And hopefully that's the case, right? That's what we're all working on, is better technology. But how do you balance that? We're going to make an investment, and it's going to take some time. You are, in fact, replacing something right now that works. You have to shut down your operations, put something new in. Now you have this solar technology, but a year from now, and I've had companies tell me, look, we waited 4 years to put solar in, and in that time solar panels went down, and it benefited us. Natural gas is now coming down. How do you speak to that possibility of being leapfrogged, and when you make your own leap to go into a technology that exists today?
Well, speaking for NASCAR, just to take an initial stab at that, it's all about, over time, applying those criteria that really define fit into the ecosystem of the sport. So it'll always be the case that there will be sort of cutting edge solutions that are out there that are ahead of what you've got deployed in the sport. But many of those cutting edge, or at least seemingly cutting edge things, aren't ready for the kind of, call it, commercial scale adoption that that a sport can give visibility to. However, in the R&D and innovation processes of a sport, which is something that's a deep aspect of the fabric of NASCAR as well, we'll be working with a range of things that may leapfrog us in a year or two, while also giving visibility to something that's here now. And specific to natural gas, for example, maybe some folks in this room, or this is intuitive to them, but actually, these things interact with each other. Back to ethanol as an example. One of the things that happened in the American ethanol industry during the time that we were doing our due diligence about whether it would be something we would put in our race cars on television was there was a key factor as to why corn ethanol became green enough for the EPA to classify it as a renewable fuel, was the fact that there was a conversion from toward natural gas for actual processing of ethanol that really gave it the profile that you could have a credible sort of green story around. And that was something that was really striking to us. So obviously we've also been watching with great interest the development of the natural gas industry and different kinds of applications because of price, which also led us to another second order thing, which is Growth Energy and the National Corn Growers Association and companies like Novozymes and New Holland in their consortium. That's what our American ethanol platform is. And we also were very keen on the fact that, for example, the membership of Growth Energy are also the leading producers of cellulosic ethanol in the world, which is that next generation of ethanol that you'll hear talked about quite a bit. Well, our partner, has benefited from the interaction of these technologies and led to us actually working with them. But we're also very aware that the next generation is going to probably emerge from this partner as well. And we're keenly aware of that and looking to the future, which could leapfrog us later. But we know it's here now too. So you have to just kind of live with those things in coexistence.
That's a good answer. We have 1 minute left. And so what we've heard is sports is this incredible platform to get a lot of the work that you're doing here up and running. The number one issue is energy, and we seem to be able to have the technologies today that address that. You increase your branding, fans are happier. There was a question about whether it helps bring better athletes in, and the answer is yes. I think we can all attest to that. So the final question, you can hop in as you will. If you had to do it all over again, you guys represent basically the best in the field. You've done incredible projects. You are leapfrogging each other in terms of how big and great your projects are. If you had it to do all over again, knowing now what you didn't know then, what would you change?
I think for me, the lighting technology is changing so rapidly. Going back to that comment, for the solar, you got to dip your feet in and show leadership and get in the game at some point. And for us, the investment in the solar panels was really signifying that we want to show leadership in Washington State and advance clean energy in our state and get rid of the stigma of Seattle's cloudy weather and demonstrate to sports fans that solar PV production is viable in our city. And we did that. And we just jumped in where solar panels got to the right point and made sense for us to do it. We did retrofit a tremendous amount of our lighting, but that was 2 years now later. LEDs are ready for prime time, and we want to do it again, so we're looking at how we take what we just did and reinvest in LED technology, which is another 70% reduction in efficiency. And it's an incredible, rapid transformation in lighting right now. We're also looking at how daylight simulation with LEDs can be. We're doing a pilot project in our locker rooms and looking at the neurological impacts of daylight simulation lighting on players to reduce fatigue during halftime. So that's another scientific way we're applying advanced technologies and actually how it impacts the game itself.
Yeah, there's been a lot of research on actual performance of the players within school buildings and sports facilities, so that's a very important aspect of it. Anybody else want to talk about what you would do differently going now?
I think ours, and again, the ability of hindsight. If I had to be able to go back in time, I think I'd run up to Harvard and become Zuckerberg's best friend. But we just, when we were building our stadium in 2001, 2, and launching it in 3, some of these were just in their infant stages, and to jump on board just didn't make economic sense. But if I had the ability to foresee the future, obviously we would have jumped in on some of those more efficient technologies that would eventually grow into being a LEED certified stadium or something along those lines. But a lot of that was still kind of being worked out. So we don't quote unquote have a regret, but I think if we were able to foresee those technologies were going to be the benefit they are today, now we're in the business of retrofitting.
Right.
That's much more expensive, obviously, than in the original build.
Exactly. That's what we're left with. Jen?
I think we let people, we were, one, really afraid of greenwashing, so we didn't engage our marketing comms or athletes early on. We wanted to make sure we were doing it, which is great and admirable, but here we are telling you one of the biggest assets we have is the marketing communications that are unique. So it took us a while to feel comfortable doing that, and I would have done it sooner. I think it would have found more traction, and I wouldn't have let people scare us to say some things aren't scalable, because we definitely started thinking we could only do things in pilot projects, and there are a couple quick wins that we've all talked about around waste, around basic minimum operations that we should have just jumped right in with. So I think the lessons are out there. You can learn what that low-hanging fruit is from other organizations, and you can seize that before you have to do the research on the advanced technology. So I think we would have seized those a little quicker.
Michael, you are on the cutting edge.
Yeah, I mean, just very briefly. So today, 4.5 years later, and this is hindsight all over again, you know, we now, our latest data show, we survey NASCAR fans versus non-fans annually on green attitudes and behaviors. We've got some very striking numbers in our latest data that are showing strong growth on already strong numbers. So currently, NASCAR fans are twice as likely as non-fans to view their household as very green and always looking for ways to positively impact the environment. That's 100% more likely than non-fans. That's up from 70% more likely a year ago and up from par between the two groups 4 years ago when we started this and baselined it. If we would have looked at that outcome as one of the pieces of the objective function in all of this for the sport, I won't take your time with sort of getting into details of specific things we might have done differently, but I can tell you that that outcome variable, that we have so much potential leverage in aspiration with our fans, affects now how we think about new strategic initiatives that are coming in the sport. So we look at out there at could that happen again and look backward, and it does create a different trace through as to how you do it. Maybe do some things faster, do some things sooner, maybe even take a bit more risk up front, that sort of thing. It's very real, and again, it speaks to the platform of sport that can have massive impact on tens of millions of people in terms of their aspiration by doing these very smart things that are visible to them and matter, you know. So.
I think that's a great way to end it. There was a question on, you know, you do these things in San Francisco or Portland, and it's very easy. Does it translate to Detroit or down south? And I think, Michael, you speak to that. You're an example of it. The NASCAR group as a whole, probably most people don't associate with being green, and you have incredible data that suggests that's exactly what it is. You know, in a large part thanks to these guys, what was a first mover, sometimes advantage, but risk that you took. Now I think the risk is starting to become on those that don't follow their lead. So thank you so much. It was a great panel, and thank you guys for attending. Appreciate it.